Fiona realized her life wasn't hers the moment she heard her mother laugh. It wasn't a warm sound, not the kind a child grows up clinging to, but a sharp, triumphant laugh that echoed down the marble corridor like a victory drum. It carried pride. It carried entitlement. And worst of all, it carried certainty. "Just 1 week more," Lady Marissa said, her voice bright enough to make the chandeliers tremble. "Our daughter will finally take her rightful place beside the Alpha King." Rightful place. Fiona almost choked on the words. She sat perfectly straight on the cushioned bench near the window, hands folded, chin lifted. Trained posture drilled into her since childhood. But inside her chest, something clawed to get out. Something wild, something desperate. "Imagine the honor," her father continued, pacing before a table stacked with scrolls of genealogy, alliances, and ceremonial protocols. "Our family name tied to the throne. The nobles will bow before us." Fiona listened as if they were discussing a prized jewel, not their only child. She drew a deep breath, hoping it would steady the trembling in her fingers. It didn't. Not today. Not anymore. 1 week until her 23rd birthday. 1 week until the mating ceremony. 1 week until she handed her life to a man the kingdom feared. A man whispered to be unstable, ruthless, touched by madness. The Mad King, they called him. "Stop fidgeting," her mother snapped without looking at her. "You must appear graceful at all times. A future queen does not shake." Future queen. The phrase landed like a chain around Fiona's ankle. She lowered her gaze to her palms. Soft. Untouched. Shaped by etiquette tutors, dance instructors, posture masters. Every lesson had sculpted her into the perfect ornament. Polished, beautiful, strategically silent. She was not being prepared to be a mate. She was being prepared to be displayed. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. Her father continued, "Once the ceremony is done, the respect we command will be unmatched. Even the High Council will think twice before challenging us." Her mother hummed in agreement, already imagining the curtsies and admiration. Fiona will bring glory to this family. Glory. But no one asked what Fiona wanted. No one ever had. She swallowed hard, trying to ignore the cold that slid down her spine whenever the king's name was mentioned. The stories she'd overheard in the servants' halls haunted her. "He murdered his father. He inherited the madness. Stay away from the palace. Monsters walk those halls." True or not, the fear was real, and they expected her to walk straight into it. Her voice cracked when she finally forced herself to speak. "Mother, Father, what if—" Her father lifted a hand. "Not now, Fiona. We are discussing important matters." Important. Everything was always important, except her feelings. She looked at them, really looked, at their shining eyes, their flushed cheeks, their excitement as they discussed her future like a property transfer. That was when it struck her with painful clarity. She wasn't their daughter today. She was their offering, and offerings weren't allowed to refuse. Fiona pressed her trembling fingers together, fighting the tightness in her throat. The room blurred, not with tears, but with the sharp understanding that the life she had lived so far was not a life at all. It was preparation, a grooming, a slow, elegant sacrifice dressed in silk. Outside, a cold wind pressed against the window pane, as if reminding her that the world beyond this polished prison still existed. And for the first time in her life, Fiona wished, desperately, that she could run toward it. While Fiona stared out her window wishing for escape, the man she feared most stood alone in a silent hall that had never felt more like a tomb. The palace was vast. Marble pillars, gold-trimmed arches, murals of past kings. But Geoffrey felt none of its grandeur. To him, the throne room was nothing more than a cage carved in stone. He sat on the edge of his father's throne, elbows on his knees, fingers pressed to his temples. The weight of the crown was not on his head. Yet it pressed on him all the same. A whisper of memory flickered at the edge of his mind. His father's voice, tired, broken. "Your mother is gone, my son. She chose another." Geoffrey squeezed his eyes shut. He hated remembering. His mother had vanished with a rogue wolf, mate bonds shattered, vows forgotten. His father, unable to survive the betrayal, slowly crumbled from within until madness hollowed his eyes. The kingdom called it poison, an enemy attack, a curse. But Geoffrey knew the truth. He was the one who found his father's body, and he was the one who lied, not because he wanted to, but because the kingdom needed to believe their king died fighting, not falling. From that day, Geoffrey embraced the rumors. He let people whisper he had murdered his father. He let nobles fear him. He let the world believe he was cold, ruthless, touched by madness. Fear kept him alive. Fear kept Julius safe. Fear kept the throne protected. But the cost had been steep. Every year, a piece of him disappeared behind the mask he wore. A knock broke the silence. "Brother?" Julius stepped in, dark-haired and sharp-eyed, carrying the concern he never voiced too loudly. "The elders are restless again. They want reassurance you're stable." Geoffrey lifted his head slowly. "Stable," he repeated, his voice dry. "Is that their newest word for obedience?" Julius gave a tired smile. "They think fear draws cracks. They don't realize you are the one keeping this kingdom from falling apart." Geoffrey stood. "Let them think I'm unstable. It keeps their claws off the throne." "Yes," Julius said softly, "but at what cost to you?" Geoffrey did not answer. Instead, he walked toward the balcony doors and pushed them open. A cold wind swept inside, carrying the distant noises of the kingdom. Markets closing, torches being lit, wolves calling to each other in the forest. Down there, he could breathe. Up here, he was suffocating. Julius watched him quietly. "You're leaving again, aren't you?" Geoffrey pulled off the heavy royal cloak and tossed it onto the nearest chair. Beneath the gold and velvet was a simpler tunic, plain, worn, familiar. "I need to see the kingdom," Geoffrey said. "Not through the council's reports, not through polished windows. Through my own eyes." "What about the preparations for your mating ceremony?" Julius asked, even though he already knew the answer. Geoffrey's jaw tightened. "I never asked for a mate," he said. "I don't need fate tying me to someone who only sees the stories carved on my name. She is your fated match. Tradition demands too much." Julius studied him, the room dimming as an unspoken shadow settled between them. "It's not the girl you fear," Julius murmured. "It's what she will see when she looks at you. The truth." Geoffrey didn't respond. Because Julius was right. Geoffrey didn't fear Fiona. He feared she would see the broken man beneath the crown and pity him. He turned away, strapping a worn leather bag over his shoulder. "I'll return before sunrise." "And if someone recognizes you?" Geoffrey's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile, but something near it. No one looks twice at a beggar. Fleming. The name he took when the crown felt too heavy. The life he lived when he needed to escape the memories that strangled him. The disguise that allowed him to move unseen, hear the people, understand their struggles. In rags, he was invisible. In rags, he was free. As he stepped out of the palace into the cold night, Geoffrey inhaled deeply, letting the darkness settle around him like an old friend. Fate claimed he was destined to take a mate. The elders claimed he was obligated to the throne. The kingdom claimed he was mad. But as he disappeared into the winding alleys of the city, he clung to the only truth he believed. Love was dangerous. Destiny was a trap. And no one, not fate, not the council, not tradition, would ever truly know the man behind the mask. Fiona barely slept. The manor hummed with preparation. Maids rushing through corridors, seamstresses carrying rolls of silk, advisors whispering about protocol and royal expectations. Every corner echoed with reminders of a life she never wanted. 2 days. Only 2 days until the mating ceremony. 2 days until she was handed over like a ceremonial token to the Alpha King. Fiona tightened her grip on the window frame, watching the estate gardens flicker with torchlight. The night breeze pressed against the glass, urging her to breathe, urging her to think. She had no voice in this future, no choice, no freedom, and choice was the one thing she'd always longed for. "Fiona!" Her mother's sharp voice snapped through the hallway. Fiona stiffened. Lady Marissa swept into the room, followed by 2 maids dragging a gown shimmering in gold threads. "Try this one," she ordered. "The king must see you at your finest." Fiona didn't move. "Mother, I don't want this mating ceremony." Her mother blinked, offended. "You are speaking nonsense again." "It isn't nonsense. It's my life." Lady Marissa's expression chilled. "Your life is your duty. The king is offering you a place of honor. You will accept it." "I don't even know him," Fiona whispered. "And what I do know terrifies me." Her mother waved a dismissive hand. "Rumors, petty gossip. You will outgrow your childish fears." "Childish?" Fiona's voice cracked, a tremor of fury rising. "You want respect, prestige, power, everything except what I want. Have you ever once asked how I feel?" Lord Branton entered behind them, hearing the tail end of her words. "Fiona," he said sternly, "you speak as if your comfort outweighs the prosperity of this family. A queen does not indulge feelings. She fulfills purpose." "My purpose," she said, chest tightening. "Or yours?" The question hit him like a slap. He stepped closer, jaw hard. "Enough. You will not disgrace us with this behavior." Fiona felt something inside her snap. For years she had bowed, agreed, smiled, obeyed. For years she had molded herself into the perfect daughter, the perfect noble, the perfect offering. Not anymore. She pushed past them. "Where are you going?" her mother demanded. "To breathe," Fiona said without turning back. They called after her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Her pulse raced as she moved through the corridor, down the stairway, past startled servants. She didn't grab a cloak or gloves. She didn't care. Outside, the night wrapped around her like a cold embrace. The manor gates rose before her like iron ribs of a beast that had swallowed her whole. She had lived her entire life inside those walls, trained, polished, silenced. Fiona pressed her palm against the gate. "I can't do this. I can't be his mate. I can't let them decide my life." She slipped through when the guards turned away, using shadows as her shield. Once her feet touched the path leading down to the town, she didn't stop. For the first time since childhood, she felt the thrill of uncertainty. Torchlight dimmed behind her. The cobblestone streets opened ahead of her. Freedom, terrifying, fragile freedom, waited. But it wasn't enough. Running didn't erase destiny. Running didn't break a mating bond. Running didn't stop the king from claiming her. She needed something more, something impossible, something drastic. Her breath puffed in clouds as she entered a quiet alley, desperation turning her limbs into fire. Panic clawed at her until she saw him. A lone beggar sat near the edge of a run-down tavern, hood low, clothes torn, hands roughened by cold and hardship. He looked harmless, forgettable, a man so far beneath noble society that even noble's shadows would not touch him. Fiona stopped. Her heart pounded with a reckless idea, wild, dangerous, but powerful enough to reshape destiny. If a beggar claimed her, if a beggar marked her, even the king could not undo it. The law was ancient, the bond sacred. Mate claims could not be overwritten, not even by royal decree. Her breath trembled. She stepped toward him. He lifted his head slightly, only enough for the faint glow of moonlight to catch his eyes. Unfamiliar eyes, calm eyes, observant, as though seeing more than she wanted anyone to see. His voice was low. "Walk carefully, my lady. These streets are not kind to girls in silk." She froze. "How did you know I'm—" "A noble girl running through alleys at night isn't common. Your gown gives you away." Fiona swallowed. Her pulse thundered. She had no plan except the fire burning her from within. "Please," she whispered. He straightened, cautious. "What do you want?" Her heart slammed against her ribs. She took a step closer, close enough to see the shadow of stubble on his jaw, close enough to feel her entire life tilt dangerously off its axis. "Claim me," she breathed. "Please, mark me." The beggar stilled. The world stilled. Fiona's fate trembled in the space between them, and in the beggar's unmoving, unreadable eyes, something dark and dangerous flickered. Not surprise, not confusion, recognition. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. The beggar didn't move, didn't blink. He simply watched Fiona, watched the storm in her eyes, the tremble in her voice, the raw fear disguised as courage. A noble girl begging a beggar to mark her. It was madness. Slowly he rose to his feet, taller than she expected, broader. His presence swallowed the narrow alleyway, turning the air thick. "And why?" he said softly. "Would a noble lady ask a beggar to steal her fate?" His tone wasn't mocking. It was something else, something sharper, like a blade pressed against truth. Fiona lifted her chin, though her voice shook. "Because my fate was never mine. I want to choose, even if the choice ruins everything." The beggar's eyes glinted beneath the hood. Amusement flickered, but something wounded flickered beneath it. "You know nothing about ruin," he murmured. "Then show me," she whispered. A dangerous silence stretched between them. Then he stepped forward, closing the distance. Fiona's breath caught as he reached up and touched her shoulder lightly, testing her resolve. "You understand," he said, voice rumbling low, "that once I mark you, there is no undoing it. No king, no council, no noble can break a mate claim." "I know," her heartbeat thundered, "and I'm not afraid." His lips curved, not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. "You should be." Before she could inhale again, he brushed her hair aside and lowered his head. His breath warmed her skin. Fiona's eyes fluttered shut, and his teeth grazed her neck, gentle at first, then firm. The marking was quick, sharp, binding. A jolt shot through her, heat, awareness, something ancient and instinctive. It wasn't painful, but it wasn't gentle either. It felt like a lock turning on a door she didn't know existed. Fiona gasped. The beggar stepped back, studying her with unreadable calm. "It is done," he said simply. She touched her neck, breath trembling. The mark pulsed beneath her fingertips, warm as fire. A beggar had just claimed her. Her entire life had just changed. Her parents, the king, the kingdom. None of it mattered right now. Only the man before her did. "What is your name?" she whispered. He hesitated. Then, Fleming. Fleming. A name rough and common, nothing like the polished titles she'd grown up hearing. He gestured for her to follow. "If you've chosen this path, you don't go back to silken servants. Come." And he started walking. Fiona stood frozen for a moment. The alley felt colder, the weight of her choice pressed against her chest. Then, lifting the hem of her gown, she hurried after him. By the time they reached the outskirts of the kingdom, Fiona's feet ached, her hair clung to her neck, and her gown collected dust and dead leaves. Fleming led her to a small wooden cabin wedged between dying trees. Its roof sagged. Smoke drifted weakly from a crooked chimney. A rusty lantern swayed by the door. This could not be real. Fiona stopped, staring. "This is where you live?" "It is," Fleming said, pushing the door open. Inside, the cabin was even smaller. One bed pushed against a wall, a table with a single stool, a cracked window patched with cloth. Shadows clung to every corner. Nothing about it felt safe. Nothing about it felt like home. Fleming turned to her. "You said you wanted control of your own fate. Fate looks like this." Her throat tightened. "I didn't expect—" "Of course you didn't." His smirk was faint but unmistakable. "Nobles rarely do." Fiona bristled. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he replied, dropping onto the stool with effortless arrogance. "A noble girl running from her golden cage doesn't magically know how to survive without servants." She crossed her arms. "I can adapt." "Prove it." Her jaw clenched. "Fine." Fleming pointed to the cold hearth. "Then start a fire." Fiona stared at the pile of logs. She had never chopped wood, never lit a hearth without a servant's help, never even been allowed near soot. But she refused to look weak. She kneeled, fumbling with the firewood. Her fingers were stiff. The bark scratched her palms. Her first attempt failed. The second, also. Fleming watched without moving. "You could help," she snapped finally. "I could," he agreed, leaning back. "But you wanted a life you chose. I want to see how real that desire is." Fiona glared at him. "You're worse than the king." A low, amused hum escaped him. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You are arrogant," she fired. "And lazy," he added lightly, according to frustrated noble girls. Despite herself, Fiona's cheeks warmed. He was impossible. Infuriating. But something inside her refused to yield. She tried again. Sparks finally caught, flames rising slowly. He nodded once. "Good." It felt absurd how proud she felt over such a small thing. But this was her life now. A life she had chosen. A life he was determined to test. As the fire crackled, warming the cramped cabin, Fiona realized something unsettling. She feared the king. But Fleming? She didn't know what she felt about him yet. Only that he was nothing like she expected, and far more dangerous to her heart. By morning, the manor was in shambles. Servants sprinted from hall to hall. Guards questioned maids, searched closets, checked stables, even combed through the gardens. The noble estate, usually ordered and pristine, had become a hive of fear. Lady Marissa stood in the center of the drawing room, trembling so violently her teacup shattered between her fingers. "She's gone," she whispered for the 100th time. "Our daughter is gone." Lord Branton paced in tight circles, his voice hoarse. "What do you mean she's gone? She wouldn't run. Not now. Not before the king's ceremony." But Fiona had run. And deep down, both of them knew why. "What have we done?" Lady Marissa breathed, clutching her shawl. "We pushed her too hard. We should have listened. Should have—" "Enough," Lord Branton snapped, but his voice wavered. "Panicking will not bring her back. The king will expect her ready tomorrow. The shame of this. Marissa, we will be ruined." A servant burst through the doors. "My lord, the guards found traces." She headed toward the lower district. Lord Branton paled. "The slums?" "It seems so." Lady Marissa covered her mouth with both hands. Tears welled. What would she be doing there? Where all the kingdom's poorest struggled to survive. Where thieves roamed. Where nobles never stepped. "She's frightened," Lord Branton said, trying to convince himself. "She must be confused. We will retrieve her before anyone learns of this." But it was too late. Rumors were already spreading. A noble daughter seen running into the night. The king's fated mate missing on the eve of the ceremony. Whispers of broken destiny, of divine insult, of madness returning to the throne, and with every passing minute, the kingdom buzzed louder. 2 hours later, a squadron of guards stood outside a run-down cabin at the forest edge. "This is the place," the captain muttered, dismounting. "Smoke from the chimney. Tracks of 2 people. Door recently opened." He motioned his men forward. Inside, Fiona was kneeling by the hearth, feeding the fire she had worked so hard to start. Her hair was messy, face smudged with ash, gown wrinkled beyond salvation, but her eyes were steady. Stronger. Fleming leaned against the wall near the door, arms crossed, gaze cool and unreadable. The door burst open. "My lady," the captain gasped. You cannot be here." Fiona jerked upright. "What are you doing here?" "We've searched everywhere for you," the captain said breathlessly. "Your parents are frantic. The kingdom—" "My lady, you must come home immediately." "No." Her voice didn't shake this time. "I'm not going." The guard stared, stunned into silence. "My lady," the captain tried again, gentler now. "The Alpha King awaits the ceremony. Running away is dangerous. Please, your safety, your family—" "I belong here," Fiona said firmly. "With him." She gestured toward Fleming. Every guard turned. The cabin seemed to shrink under the weight of their disbelief. "With the beggar?" One guard whispered, horrified. "Yes," Fiona said. "I chose him. I belong to him." Shock rippled through the room. Fleming didn't move, didn't smile, didn't deny it. The captain swallowed hard. "My lady, if what you're saying is true, this is treason against the crown." Fiona lifted her chin. "Then I am guilty." "But I am not leaving with you." The guards exchanged helpless glances. One whispered, "The king's wrath will be unimaginable." Another murmured, "This will cause an uproar. The nobles will demand punishment." Fleming eyed them coolly. "She's staying. Go." The captain hesitated. Something in Fleming's tone, quiet, commanding, unnatural for a man in rags, sent a shiver down his spine. But duty won. "We must inform the manor," he said, "and the palace." As the guards exited, the air in the cabin thickened. Fiona looked at Fleming, her pulse quickening. "Are you angry?" "No," he said simply. "You made your choice. Now the kingdom must live with it." But she saw something flicker behind his eyes. Something like concern, or responsibility, or guilt. She didn't understand it yet. Chaos. That was the only word to describe the atmosphere. The elders stormed into the council chamber, robes flapping, faces twisted with outrage. "This is an insult to the crown," Elder Rowan roared. "The king's fated mate has run off, run into the arms of a beggar." "It is a humiliation," Elder Vartan shouted. "If the king will not handle this, someone must." Julius sat alone at the head of the table, expression composed but eyes sharp. "The king," Julius said slowly, "is ill." The room froze. "What do you mean ill?" Elder Rowan demanded. "He cannot attend council," Julius continued. "He is unwell." The elders exchanged dark looks. "It's happening," one whispered. "The madness, like his father." Julius's jaw tightened. "Choose your words carefully." Elder Vartan sneered. "The kingdom cannot function under a mad king." "Mind yourself," Julius growled. But rumors were already feeding their frenzy. First, he disappears from council meetings. Now his mate flees before the ceremony. Perhaps he frightened her. Perhaps the madness drove her away. Julius slammed his hand on the table. "One more word against the king," he said, voice low and dangerous, "and I will consider it treason." The elders recoiled. They had expected the younger prince to be more pliable, more contained. They were wrong. The kingdom they thought vulnerable was still protected by its wolves. But the storm had begun. And Julius knew only Geoffrey could calm it, wherever he was, whatever he was planning. The morning after the guard's visit dawned with a heavy hush. Fiona woke on the single narrow bed. Fleming had taken the floor without comment and stared at the wooden ceiling above her. Cold air nipped her skin. The faint smell of smoke clung to the blankets. This was nothing like the silk canopy she had grown up beneath. Yet, she didn't regret being here. Not yet. She sat up slowly, brushing hair from her face. Fleming was already awake, shirtless, leaning against the wall, sharpening a small hunting knife. His movements were steady, practiced, almost elegant despite his worn clothes. He didn't glance at her, but she felt him notice every breath she took. Fiona rose awkwardly from the bed. Good morning. He didn't look up. She frowned. Do you always speak in half-words? When half-words are enough? She muttered something under her breath about arrogance as she slipped on the oversized cloak he'd tossed to her last night. Fleming's eyes flicked up briefly. If you're cold, add wood to the fire. She stiffened. I am planning to. Then do it. Her jaw tightened. Was everything a test to him? Still, she crossed the room and knelt at the hearth. Her fingers remembered the rhythm from the night before. She arranged the kindling, coaxed sparks, and managed to get the flames rising without asking for help. Fleming didn't praise her, but she caught the slight softening in his gaze. It was enough. Eat, he said, tossing a small loaf of coarse bread onto the table. Fiona blinked at it. Is that breakfast? It's what I have. Her noble upbringing recoiled. She'd never eaten anything that looked so hard or smelled so plain. But hunger sharpened her stubbornness. She tore off a piece and chewed. It felt like chewing a stone. Fleming smirked. You don't have to pretend to enjoy it. I'm not pretending, she lied. Your face says otherwise. She glared at him, and he returned to sharpening his knife, looking entirely too satisfied with himself. If he wanted her to break, he would be disappointed. After breakfast, if it could be called that, Fleming stood and tossed an axe at her feet. She jumped back. What is that for? Firewood. She stared at him. You expect me to chop wood? Unless you prefer freezing. I've never... I know. The corner of his mouth twitched. That's why I'm curious to see what you do. Fiona inhaled sharply. He was doing this deliberately. Testing her resolve. Assessing the girl who chose a beggar to escape a king. Fine. She'd show him she wasn't fragile porcelain. She lifted the axe with both hands, nearly toppling from the surprising weight, and staggered toward the chopping block. Fleming leaned against a tree, arms folded, observing. Stand with your feet apart, he said. She adjusted. You're gripping it wrong. She shifted again. Not like that. She spun around, exasperated. Then show me properly. His brows rose. You want my help now? No, she snapped. I just want you to stop talking like I'm already failing. A slow smirk spread across his face. You are failing. Her eyes widened. You... She lifted the axe again, determination burning through her embarrassment. She swung. Thud. The blade buried itself unevenly into the log, but it stayed upright. Fleming straightened. Fiona's breathless triumph rose with the morning air. There, she said, panting slightly. Not failing? For the first time, Fleming's expression softened. Not mocking, not amused, but quietly impressed. Not bad, he admitted. Heat shot through her at the unexpected praise. She didn't understand why it felt like a small victory. Later, as the sun dipped low, Fiona attempted her next challenge, cooking something other than stone-hard bread. She hovered over the pot suspended above the small fire. Steam curled around her face. She stirred, squinted, added more herbs, then frowned at the mushy mess forming. Fleming lounged on the stool, watching her struggle with far too much enjoyment. What exactly are you trying to make? He asked. She stirred harder. Food. Looks like punishment. If you're not going to help, at least be quiet. I'm trying, he said, but the smell is loud. Fiona huffed, cheeks burning. She stirred again, then tasted a tiny spoonful. Her entire face wrinkled. It needs salt, Fleming said without looking up. How do you know? You look like someone who just licked a river rock. Why do all your insults involve rocks? It's the closest thing to your cooking. Despite her indignation, she laughed. A small, startled sound, but real. Fleming glanced up, eyes narrowing slightly, as if he wasn't used to hearing laughter in this cabin. Something shifted between them in that moment. Not affection. Not yet, but the faintest spark of ease. Of familiarity. Of something that might one day become warmth. By the time night settled, Fiona had chopped firewood, cooked badly, cleaned the cabin, washed the soot off her hands and gown, and Fleming had watched, commented, tested, quietly admitted to himself that she was nowhere near as fragile as he expected. As she placed fresh logs onto the fire, he studied her in the firelight. "You're different," he said finally. She glanced up. "From what?" "From every noble I've met." A faint blush rose to her cheeks. "Is that a compliment?" He shrugged. "You're still spoiled," she gasped. "I am not." "But you're trying," he said. Her breath hitched. Trying, struggling, learning. Not because she had to, but because she chose this life. When she lay down on the bed that night, exhaustion tugging her into sleep, she heard Fleming shift on the floor. "Good night," she murmured. After a pause, he replied quietly, "Good night, Fiona." And something warm settled in her chest. A strange new life had begun. Hard, humbling, and unexpectedly hopeful. The next evening settled quietly over the cabin. A soft orange glow flickered across the rough wooden walls. The fire crackled, warming the tight space where Fiona sat curled on the edge of the bed, knees drawn close, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Fleming was tending to the fire, adding a final log before sitting across from her on the lone stool. Usually he kept a comfortable distance, content to observe her without saying much. But tonight the air felt heavier, closer, different. Fiona's hands twisted in the blanket. Her thoughts churned too loudly to swallow them down this time. Fleming noticed. "You're quiet," he said. She hesitated. "I've been thinking." "That could be dangerous," he murmured. She gave him a weak, tired smile. "So you keep telling me." Silence fell again, long, stretching, expectant. Then Fiona exhaled shakily, as if forcing the words out of her chest. "Do you know why I chose to run?" she whispered. Fleming's gaze didn't waver. "I've been curious." She swallowed, her throat tight. "Because I felt like an object, like something to be traded. All my life my parents told me what to wear, how to sit, how to speak, how to smile. They shaped me into the perfect mate for the king, not because they loved me, but because they loved what I could give them." Her voice cracked, and she looked down at her hands. "I was never a daughter," she whispered, "just a doorway to power." Fleming said nothing, but his expression shifted, ever so slightly. A flicker of understanding, of anger on her behalf. She continued, voice trembling. "Marrying the king felt like walking into another cage, a bigger one, a loveless one. And I don't think I could survive that. Being unwanted, being unloved." The word unloved hovered in the air between them, soft and raw. Fleming leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His eyes, usually guarded, cold, softened with something she couldn't define. "Love isn't guaranteed," he said quietly. "Not even with a mate. Sometimes it leaves. Sometimes it breaks." Fiona looked up, surprised at the depth in his voice. "You say that like you've lived it." He breathed out, long and heavy, as if letting go of a memory he'd held on to too tightly. "My mother," he began, "was my father's mate." Already Fiona felt the shift. The way his voice dipped, the way the firelight glinted against pain he tried to hide. "She left us for a rogue wolf," Fleming continued. "Left without a word, without a backward glance. My father waited for her, long after she chose another. He told himself she would return, that she couldn't possibly forget the bond they shared." He paused, jaw tightening. "But she never came back." A hollow ache filled the room. Fiona's breath stilled. "My father wasn't strong enough to survive that pain." His voice lowered. "He took his own life." Fiona covered her mouth, eyes wide and glistening. "Fleming, I'm so sorry." He nodded once, as if acknowledging the emotion but refusing to be consumed by it. "After that, the kingdom turned its back on us. We became an inconvenience, a reminder of weakness. There was no one left to care what happened to me or my younger brother. Her heart tugged painfully. Is that why you beg? It's less humiliating than starving, he said simply. And it keeps people from expecting anything from me. For a moment, neither spoke. Fiona wiped at her eyes. I thought you were lazy, that you didn't want to work. He almost smiled. Most nobles assume that. I shouldn't have, she whispered. He studied her for a long moment. You judged what you saw. Most people do. At least you're willing to see more now. The fire popped softly, filling the silence between them. Then Fiona reached out, hesitant, unsure, and touched his hand, just lightly, just enough to let him pull away if he wanted. He didn't. Her voice was barely a breath. Your story, it breaks my heart. Fleming's throat worked, emotion tightening his features. Yours breaks mine. The confession hung between them like a fragile thread, thin, delicate, but unbreakable now that it existed. 2 stories. 2 wounds, 2 people trying desperately to survive pain they never asked for. Fiona leaned closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. Fleming didn't move away. Under the warm glow of the firelight, with 2 broken lives laid bare, something gentle and dangerous bloomed. A fragile bridge. A quiet understanding. A spark, small but real. The kind that could change everything. The manor had never felt so cold. Lady Marissa sat at the foot of Fiona's empty bed, fingers tangled in the abandoned blankets, as if holding them tightly could somehow bring her daughter back. Her eyes were swollen from crying, something no servant had ever seen her do. The silence in the room was suffocating. Lord Branton stood by the window, staring at the grounds where guests would have gathered for the mating celebration. Instead, the courtyard was deserted. Even the guards patrolling the estate moved quietly, as though afraid to draw attention to the family's disgrace. It is our fault, Lady Marissa whispered finally. All of it. Every bit. Lord Branton closed his eyes. Marissa, please. No. She rose unsteadily, tears sliding down her cheeks. We pushed her. We pushed her and pushed her until she couldn't breathe. Until she had no choice but to run from us. He opened his eyes, pain clouding them. We wanted what was best. For who? She demanded, voice cracking. For her, or for us? The question struck him hard. His shoulders slumped. We should have listened, Lady Marissa whispered. She was scared, and we ignored her. We treated her like a key to the palace, not a daughter. Lord Branton sank into the chair beside the window, rubbing his face with trembling hands. The humiliation, the disgrace. The entire kingdom is laughing at us. They should, she said brokenly. We earned it. A long silence followed, 2 parents drowning in regret. Then a soft knock came at the door. A young maid peeked inside, pale and frightened. My lord, my lady, word has reached the palace. Lady Marissa stiffened, and the elders are furious. They say the king's wrath will be unforgiving. Lord Branton gripped the armchair tightly. And Lady Fiona? He asked. The maid hesitated. They say she refuses to return. She claims she belongs to the beggar. Lady Marissa gasped, collapsing onto the bed. Sobs tore from her chest. Lord Branton finally looked defeated. Truly defeated, for the first time in his life. What have we done? He whispered. Julia stood at the center of the council chamber, exhausted shadows beneath his eyes. He had barely slept, spending the last day fending off rumors, stopping uprisings among nobles, and keeping the kingdom from fracturing under panic. He felt the weight of his brother's absence like a stone on his chest. The elders burst into the room, robes swishing like angry flames. This chaos cannot continue, Elder Rowan snapped. The king must address this insult immediately. He won't, Julia said sharply. He is unwell. Unwell, Elder Vartan scoffed. He has not attended council for days. Now his fated mate runs off into the arms of a beggar? What does that say about his rule? His stability? The word stability dripped with accusation. Julius's eyes hardened. Watch your tone. But the elders were relentless. This is proof he is losing control. His father's madness is returning. The kingdom whispers he has completely lost his mind. A king who cannot keep his mate cannot keep his throne. Julius slammed his fist onto the table. Enough! The elders went silent, startled by the ferocity in his voice. Julius stepped forward, gaze blazing. Do you forget what he has done for this kingdom? Do you forget the threats he has silenced so you could sit comfortably in your gilded chairs? Elder Rowan narrowed his eyes. We forget nothing, but we see clearly now. The throne is vulnerable. The kingdom is vulnerable. And if the king continues to hide, chaos will consume us all. Julius's breath hitched. You want me to take the throne? Someone must, Elder Vartan replied coldly. Before the kingdom breaks. Julius stared at them, anger and disbelief warring in his eyes. You think I would betray my own brother? Not betrayal, Rowan corrected. Salvation. Julius laughed once, dark, humorless. If you speak of such treason again, I will have you all arrested. The elders recoiled, but their expressions hardened with resentment and fear. Julius turned away, gripping the back of the king's chair, the seat Geoffrey abandoned so often. Where are you, brother? How long can I hold this kingdom together alone? He straightened, masking his fear with steel. Geoffrey will address the council when he is ready, he said. Until then, I am acting in his stead, and I will not tolerate another word against him. The elders exchanged grim looks. The rebellion had not begun yet, but the roots were already spreading. And Julius knew it. Night settled thickly over the cabin. But Geoffrey, Fleming, couldn't sleep. Not tonight. He sat on the stool beside the small hearth, elbows on his knees, gaze fixed on the quiet rise and fall of Fiona's breathing. She slept curled beneath his jacket, her cheek pressed softly into the pillow, dark lashes brushing her skin like delicate strokes of ink. She looked peaceful, safe, trusting. It was the trust that weighed on him most. She had given him everything, her defiance, her freedom, even her heart's fragile hope, without realizing the truth of the man she tied herself to. Geoffrey rubbed a hand over his face, the tension coiling through his body like a trapped animal pacing the walls of his chest. He'd made a choice when he offered her shelter, but now choices were being made for him, by rumors, by nobles, by a kingdom spiraling out of control. 2 days. In 2 days, the kingdom had nearly fractured because its future queen had vanished, because its king had disappeared, because fear had no boundaries when left to grow unchecked. Geoffrey had always used fear as armor. Now it was turning into a blade pointed at him. He exhaled slowly. How much longer can I stay here? How much longer can I pretend Fleming is enough to hold this world together? The truth gnawed at him. He couldn't hide anymore. Not with the council pushing Julius toward the throne. Not with nobles whispering that he had inherited his father's madness. Not with elders demanding punishment for Fiona's defiance. And not with Fiona sleeping less than 3 steps away, marked as his mate, but unaware she had bound herself to the very king she feared. Geoffrey looked at her again. The firelight flickered across her features, casting soft shadows along her jaw. A delicate strand of hair rested against her lips. His chest tightened, strangely, painfully. I can't lose her. The thought struck him like a blow. Not as a king protecting an heir, not as an alpha preserving a mating bond, but as a man who had been alone too long, who had shut out the world to survive, who had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Fiona saw him. Not the king, not the monster, not the rumor. Him. And for the first time in years, he felt something he didn't know how to handle. Fear. Not of enemies, Not of the throne, but of losing the only person who had looked at him without fear. Jeffrey leaned back, running a hand through his hair. He'd tried to keep himself detached. Tried to treat her like a problem to manage, a girl running from a fate she didn't want. Tried to believe she would eventually return to her noble life once she realized the harshness of his world. But every day she stayed. Every chore she attempted. Every laugh she allowed herself to share. Every moment she trusted him. She carved deeper and deeper into the walls around his heart. "What are you doing to me?" he whispered under his breath. The words were meant for himself, but they filled the silence anyway. Fiona shifted slightly in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Jeffrey's breath stilled. Instinct made him reach out before he could stop himself, pulling the blanket higher to cover her shoulders. His fingers lingered for a heartbeat too long. He pulled away sharply. This was dangerous. He wasn't supposed to care. He wasn't supposed to want. He was a king shaped by lies and loss, not by love. He was a man damaged by betrayal, not softened by tender nights beside a fire. But Fiona had changed everything without even trying, and the kingdom was burning because of it. He stood abruptly and moved to the small cracked window. Outside, darkness stretched endlessly, the wind rustling through dying leaves. The world felt as unsettled as he did. "I can't keep lying," he murmured. Not to Fiona, not to Julius, not to the kingdom. Fiona deserved the truth. If she knew who he truly was, if she learned that the king she feared was the beggar she had chosen, would she still choose him? Jeffrey's chest tightened painfully. Hope and dread warred inside him. He hadn't feared rejection in years, not since his mother chose another wolf over her mate bond, breaking his father's mind and shattering any belief Jeffrey had in love. But Fiona made him want something impossible: trust, acceptance, a place to belong that wasn't carved from fear. He pressed his palms against the window frame. He had to return to the palace soon, had to face the council, had to protect Julius from the elders' schemes, had to reclaim control of the kingdom before everything collapsed. But before he left, he needed to tell Fiona the truth. He owed her that much. He owed himself that much. He looked back at her, small, peaceful, wrapped in his jacket like it belonged to her. Something deep inside him whispered, "If she walks away after hearing the truth, at least you had this." Jeffrey closed his eyes briefly, letting the fire's warmth brush his back. Tomorrow, he would tell her. Tomorrow, everything would change again. Dawn crept slowly over the forest, threading pale gold light through the cracks of the cabin walls. Fiona woke to the smell of smoke and the soft rustle of someone moving nearby. She blinked sleepily and found Fleming standing near the door, fastening the last buckle of his worn boots. He looked different this morning, tense, distant, as if bracing himself for a storm only he could see. "Fleming?" she murmured, sitting up. "You're awake early." His eyes flicked to her, shadowed with something heavy. "We need to leave soon." Her heart fluttered. "Leave? Where?" He hesitated. "To meet my brother." Fiona straightened, excitement lighting her eyes. "Your brother? You never mentioned—" She caught herself and softened her voice. "Does he live nearby?" "No," Fleming said quietly. "But you need to meet him. It's time." His tone carried a finality she didn't understand, but she trusted him. She rose from the bed, pulling on her cloak. "Then let's go. I want to know more about your world." He didn't reply immediately, and that silence, tight, trembling, felt wrong. They walked through the thinning forest, morning air crisp and cool. Birds chirped softly overhead. Fiona walked beside him, unaware of the weight crushing his chest with every step. She glanced at him. "You're quiet today." "Yes. Are you worried?" she asked gently. He didn't answer. His jaw clenched as though the truth was caught behind his teeth. Fiona slowed her pace. "You can tell me anything, Fleming. You know that." He stopped walking, Her heartbeat quickened. Something was coming, something that made his shoulders look heavier than they ever had. "What's wrong?" she whispered. Fleming turned toward her, the morning light catching the lines of his face. The tiredness, the conflict, the fear. "Before you meet him," he said, "you need to know something." Fiona stepped closer, concerned. "What is it?" He reached up, slowly, hesitantly, to touch the edge of his hood. Then he lowered it. Fiona blinked. Without the hood, he already looked different, sharper, more commanding, impossibly familiar in a way she couldn't place. He ran a hand through his tangled hair, loosening the grit, reshaping himself with each pass. His posture shifted, taller, straighter. The slouch of a beggar melted away, replaced by something steady and powerful. Fiona's breath hitched. "Fleming?" He met her gaze. The sadness in his eyes was unmistakable. "My name," he said quietly, "is Jeffrey." Her stomach dropped. "I am the Alpha King." The world tilted beneath her feet. She stumbled back, hand over her mouth. No, you can't. You're not." Every memory ripped through her at once. His eyes, his strength, his commanding presence, his silence, his arrogance. All the things she thought belonged to a beggar suddenly made cruel sense. She shook her head, voice breaking. "You lied to me." "I never lied," he said softly. "I only hid." "That's the same thing," she cried, stepping further away. "You knew who I was. You knew what your name meant to me, and you let me. Her voice cracked. Her chest felt like it was splitting open. "You let me run from you," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "You let me choose you because I thought you were safe, not because you were the king I feared." Jeffrey swallowed hard. "I didn't intend to deceive you, but when you asked a beggar to claim you, desperate to escape marriage with me, I didn't know how to tell you the truth without breaking you more." Fiona pressed her palm to her forehead, trying to breathe. "You used me," she choked. "You let me believe you were nobody." His jaw tightened. "I am not nobody, but I am also not the monster you feared." Fiona's breathing shook violently. "You marked me," she whispered. "You marked me knowing exactly who you were, knowing I was running from you." "I marked you," he said quietly, "because I saw your fear, and because the girl in front of me wasn't choosing a crown or a throne. She was choosing freedom. I wanted to give you that, even if it was temporary." "Temporary!" Her voice cracked open. "Was I supposed to go back when you were done watching me struggle? Was I just a game to you?" Pain flashed through his eyes. "No, never." Fiona turned away, tears falling freely now. She didn't know whether to run or scream or collapse. Jeffrey stepped forward carefully. "Fiona, don't," she whispered. "Just don't." Silence swallowed them whole. For a moment, Fiona could hear nothing but her own heartbeat, pounding with betrayal, loss, and something dangerously close to heartbreak. Then a soft realization cut through the panic. "You didn't lie about your father," she whispered. "About the Queen. About how the kingdom turned its back." Jeffrey exhaled shakily. "Those things were always true. And the rumors." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "You let everyone believe you were mad, ruthless, dangerous, because you wanted to protect your brother." He nodded slowly. Understanding dawned, soft but heavy. Everything made sense. The walls around his heart, the solitude, the burden he carried alone, the pain he hid behind his disguise. Her anger wavered. "Why didn't you trust me with this?" she whispered. "Because I didn't want to see fear in your eyes," he admitted. "Not your fear, anyone's but yours." Her breath stilled. "And now that you know," he said quietly, "if you wish to leave me, I won't stop you." Fiona stared at him, at the king who begged for nothing yet stood before her ready to lose everything. Slowly, trembling, she stepped toward him. "Jeffrey," she whispered, voice softer than the morning wind. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. But I see you now." He froze. "I see the man behind the rumors," she said. "The man who carries everyone's burden, the man who protected his brother, the man who lost everything but still fights for his people." Her fingers brushed his. He inhaled sharply. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered. "Not now. Not ever." Emotion flickered across his face. Relief, disbelief, longing. Then, slowly, cautiously, he reached for her hand. She let him. The truth had shaken them, but it had also freed them. Together they continued toward the palace, no longer beggar and runaway noble, but king and mate, walking toward the future they could no longer outrun. The palace loomed ahead like a sleeping giant. Cold stone walls catching the morning light, banners trembling with the early breeze. Once, the sight had filled Fiona with dread. Today, she felt something different. Strength, resolve, a certainty she hadn't known she possessed. Geoffrey walked beside her, no longer hiding behind rags or the slouch of a weary beggar. With every step, the king in him returned. The straightened spine, the sharpened gaze, the quiet authority that rippled outward, like heat. But Fiona saw what others never had. The man beneath the power, the wound beneath the crown, the heart behind the armor. He paused just before reaching the council wing and turned to her. "Stay in the shadows until I call," he murmured. "If the elders see you too soon, they'll twist this into another weapon." Fiona nodded. "I trust you." A flicker of emotion crossed his face. Brief, warm, grounding. Then the mask settled into place. Not the mask of madness or fear, but the rightful king reclaiming his throne. He pushed the council doors open. The room exploded with noise the moment Geoffrey stepped inside. "Your Majesty, where have you been? The kingdom is in chaos. Your mate dishonored the throne. We must strip her family of title. Take responsibility, my king." Their voices clashed, harsh and greedy, like vultures fighting over the promise of a corpse. Geoffrey stood still until silence rippled through the room like a shock wave. The elders froze. The nobles stiffened. Even Julius, standing near the throne, released a breath he'd been holding for days. Geoffrey's presence filled the hall effortlessly. No madness, no weakness, no hesitation. Only authority. He stepped forward. "Enough." The word cracked like a whip. One by one, the elders lowered their gazes. Geoffrey continued, voice calm and lethal. "While I was away, you spread lies. You stirred fear. You tried to turn my brother against me." Elder Rowan sputtered. We acted for the kingdom's safety." "No," Geoffrey said, cutting through the excuse. "You acted for your own gain." A murmur swept the room. Julius straightened beside him, jaw clenched with pride. Geoffrey paced slowly across the dais, each step echoing. "You call me unstable. You call me ruthless. You whisper that I inherited my father's madness." The elder stiffened, suddenly aware of how closely he watched each of them. "My father died because of betrayal," Geoffrey said, his voice dropping into something dark and cold. "And I carried the weight of that truth alone. I let you call me mad because it kept you afraid of challenging the throne." He looked them in the eye, each one by one. "But your fear has twisted into greed, and greed is treason." Every elder recoiled. "From today forward," Geoffrey continued, stepping onto the dais, "anyone who speaks against the throne will face death. Anyone who conspires against my brother will answer to me, and anyone who questions my rule will meet the consequences of forgetting who their king is." Silence fell like snowfall. Not fearful silence. Awestruck silence. For the first time, the council saw him not as a rumor, but as a monarch. Julius moved to Geoffrey's side, shoulders squared. The unity between them was unmistakable. Two brothers, a single front. "This kingdom is not yours to manipulate," Julius said coldly. "It is ours to protect, and we will protect it, together." The elders bowed their heads, trembling. From the corner of the hall, hidden behind a marble column, Fiona watched everything unfold. Her breath slowed, Her fear dissolved. A new understanding bloomed inside her chest. This was Geoffrey, not the beggar, not the monster, not the broken boy carrying his father's shame. This was the true king, the leader who wielded his pain like armor, his intelligence like a blade, and his presence like fire. He didn't rule through madness. He ruled through mastery. Fiona's throat tightened, pride swelling in her chest. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of what being mated to a king meant. She was honored. Geoffrey stopped before the elders, voice steady. "Now," he said, "we will address the matter that has consumed your gossip." Elder Vartan looked up nervously. "The girl, your mate, she has defied tradition. Surely her family must face punishment." Two figures were ushered in by guards, Lord Branton and Lady Marissa. They looked nothing like the proud nobles who once paraded their daughter as a prize. Lady Marissa's hair was disheveled, her eyes red and swollen. Lord Branton's shoulders sagged, his fine robes wrinkled and dirt-stained from kneeling outside the palace gates for hours, begging to be heard. As soon as they entered, both parents dropped to their knees. The hall fell into a tense hush. "My king," Lord Branton said, voice hoarse with desperation, "we have come to accept any punishment you see fit." Lady Marissa clasped her hands tightly, head bowed so low her forehead touched the marble floor. "We have failed you, and we have failed our daughter. Strip us of everything, ban us, cast us out. We only ask that her life be spared." The nobles murmured loudly at this, seizing the moment with vicious eagerness. Yes, banishment is fitting. They dishonored the crown. They must pay. Their daughter rejected the king for a beggar, shame of the highest order. The words cut Fiona like knives. Geoffrey's eyes darkened, but he said nothing yet. Lord Branton's voice shook as he continued. "We thought we were doing what was best for her, what would bring honor to our family, but we were blind. We saw only power. We never saw her pain." Lady Marissa sobbed softly. "We were wrong. We were selfish. And now the whole kingdom knows it." A noble shouted, "They brought humiliation on us all." Another added, "If you spare them, your majesty, what message does that send? That defiance goes unpunished." Geoffrey tensed, jaw clenched. He knew this moment mattered, not just for Fiona, not just for her parents, but for the type of king he would become. Fear had guarded the throne long enough. Before he could speak, Fiona's voice rose, clear, steady, unmistakable. "No one will be banished." The entire hall turned. Fiona stepped forward from her hidden column, lifting her chin with a grace that silenced even the loudest nobles. Her parents looked up in stunned disbelief. Lady Marissa whispered, "Fiona." Fiona took a breath. "The man I ran to," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "The beggar I chose is not a commoner." A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. "The beggar I chose," she continued, "is the Alpha King." Gasps erupted. Chaos followed. "What? She chose the king? He disguised himself. This changes everything." Geoffrey remained still, watching Fiona, not the hall, but Fiona, with a look that mixed pride, gratitude, and something deeper. Lord Branton crumpled, emotion breaking through. "Fiona, we didn't know. We didn't understand." Lady Marissa covered her mouth, tears flowing freely. "My child, we were so wrong. We hurt you. We never meant to. Please, forgive us." Fiona knelt before them, taking her mother's hands. "I was angry. I was hurt. But I never wanted your destruction. I just wanted to be seen." Her father bent his head. "We see you now, truly." Fiona smiled through her tears. "Then I forgive you." A hush fell again. The nobles watched, uncertain, caught between old expectations and a new reality unfolding before their eyes. Geoffrey stepped forward, and for the first time in his reign, he addressed the council not as a feared shadow, but as a leader unmasked. "Fiona's parents acted in selfishness, yes," he said, voice steady. But they were blinded by ambition, not malice. And she, he gestured to Fiona, has shown forgiveness where many of you would show cruelty. He let the words settle. Therefore, he continued, no titles will be stripped, no lands taken, no banishment. They will remain nobles of this kingdom and answer to their daughter's judgment, not yours. The elders bristled. The nobles muttered. None dared object openly. Not with the king standing tall, not with his brother beside him, not with the kingdom finally seeing who Geoffrey truly was. Fiona rose, joining Geoffrey at the dais. He reached for her hand, publicly, deliberately, letting the hall witness the strength of their bond. This, Geoffrey said, is the new order of this kingdom, one of justice, not fear, one of truth, not whispers. And though the room remained tense, the shift was undeniable. This was no longer the reign of the Mad King. This was the rise of a king who had nothing left to hide. And beside him, a queen who had chosen him, fully and freely. The news spread faster than wildfire. By dawn, bards were singing. By midday, merchants were shouting it in the markets. By nightfall, the entire kingdom stood breathless. The runaway noble girl who chose a beggar had chosen the king instead, and the king had chosen her back. The palace, once heavy with tension and fear, stirred with newfound energy. Servants rushed through halls with armfuls of flowers. Tapestries were unfurled, musicians summoned, lanterns lit until the entire castle glowed like a living star. The mating ceremony would take place at sunset, a moment in history. A story destined to be retold for generations. Fiona stood before a tall mirror in the royal chambers, clothing attendants bustling around her, fitting silk over her shoulders, weaving delicate silver threads through her hair. Her reflection looked unfamiliar and breathtaking. Not the porcelain doll molded by her parents, not the runaway girl hiding in a forest cabin. Not the trembling noble who feared a king she'd never met. Today, she saw a woman who had chosen her future, a queen. Lady Marissa entered quietly, hands clasped nervously. Fiona stiffened for a moment, habit, but the soft emotion in her mother's eyes disarmed her. My daughter, Lady Marissa whispered. You look radiant. Fiona smiled gently. Thank you, Mother. Her mother stepped forward, adjusting a strand of hair with trembling fingers. I failed you, she said softly, but I will spend the rest of my life earning your forgiveness. You already have it, Fiona said, placing her hand over her mother's. Tears shimmered in Lady Marissa's eyes. You are stronger than I ever imagined. Fiona exhaled, steadying herself. Strength, choice, heart. These were hers now. Across the palace, Geoffrey stood on the balcony overlooking the courtyard, adorned in black and silver ceremonial armor. Not battle armor, but the armor of a king stepping fully into his destiny. The breeze tugged at his cloak. His hair, freed from the beggar's disguise, caught the light with a regal sheen. His presence commanded every inch of the space around him. But beneath the regal veneer, something softer pulsed in his expression. He was waiting for her. Julius approached from behind. You look unsettled. Geoffrey exhaled through his nose. I don't get unsettled. You do now, Julius said with a smirk. Geoffrey shot him a warning look, but Julius continued anyway. You love her. Geoffrey's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it, because the truth had become too large, too real, too woven into his heartbeat to hide. Instead, he said quietly, she walked into my world without fear. She challenged me. She chose me. He paused, and I don't want to imagine this kingdom without her. Julius's smile softened. Then go get your mate, brother. The courtyard was transformed into a breathtaking scene. Arches wrapped in blossoms, lanterns floating like tiny moons, a long aisle covered with petals that shimmered under the torches. Nobles lined both sides, whispering in awe. Commoners packed the balconies, cheering. Wolves in the distance howled their blessing. When Fiona stepped out onto the balcony above the courtyard, a hush fell. She walked down the grand staircase slowly, each step echoing with purpose. The silver-threaded gown flowed around her like water. Her hair shimmered in the firelight. And Geoffrey. He couldn't look away. His breath caught. For a man carved from steel, he suddenly felt unsteady, undone. She wasn't a runaway. She wasn't a mistake. She wasn't a duty. She was his. Fiona reached him, heart pounding. Geoffrey held out his hand, not as a king commanding surrender, but as a mate offering trust. She placed her hand in his. Warmth surged between them, unmistakable. The high priestess stepped forward. "Today," she proclaimed, voice ringing across the courtyard, "we witness not a union of convenience, nor a union of politics, but a union chosen, fated, completed." She turned to Geoffrey. "Alpha King, do you accept Fiona not through tradition, not through fear, but through truth and heart?" Geoffrey looked straight into Fiona's eyes. "With everything I am," he said. Fiona's breath trembled. "And Fiona," the priestess said, "do you accept Alpha King Geoffrey, not as a crown, not as a burden, but as your mate and equal?" "I do," Fiona whispered, voice steady, eyes shining. "With all my heart." The priestess nodded. "Then seal the bond." Geoffrey leaned down. Their lips met softly, then deeply, and the bond surged between them like ancient fire awakening after a long sleep. A glowing mark shimmered faintly on Fiona's neck, this time bright, pulsing with acceptance rather than desperation. The crowd erupted. Cheers, howls, applause. A tidal wave of celebration crashing through the courtyard. Geoffrey held her close, forehead resting against hers, both of them breathing the same breath. "You chose me," he murmured. "You chose me first," she whispered back. His arms tightened around her. Neither had expected love. Neither had sought it. Yet here it was. Wild, unexpected, and stronger than fate itself. Tonight, the kingdom witnessed a ceremony. But history would remember a love story. A king awakened, a queen reborn. A bond that would change the kingdom forever. The celebration raged across the palace grounds, music swelling through the night air, wolves howling their blessing from the forest edge, banners fluttering under the glow of 1,000 lanterns. But far above the noise, beyond the cheers and dancing, Geoffrey led Fiona up a flight of quiet stairs to the highest balcony of the palace, the one he had always kept locked. Only the king knew this place. Only he knew why. Tonight, he opened it for her. The balcony stretched wide and open, overlooking the entire kingdom. A soft wind swept across the stone floor, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers and distant wood smoke. Fiona stepped out, breath catching at the breathtaking view. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Geoffrey didn't look at the horizon. He looked at her. "Yes," he murmured. "It is." She turned toward him slowly, gown shimmering like starlight. His hand brushed hers, gentle, hesitant, no longer the touch of a man hiding behind rags or fear. "You kept this place locked," Fiona said, her voice soft. "Why?" Geoffrey glanced outward, eyes shadowed by an old pain. "This was my father's favorite place. After he died, I locked it because I couldn't stand the memories." Fiona's heart tightened. He let out a slow breath. "I thought if I pretended the room didn't exist, the grief would stay out." "And did it?" she asked gently. "No," he said quietly. "It followed me everywhere." She stepped closer, taking his hand fully. "It doesn't have to anymore." A faint smile tugged at his lips. Small but real. "I opened it tonight," Geoffrey said, "because I wanted the first memory here to be with you." Her breath trembled. Geoffrey reached up, brushing his fingers along her cheek. "You changed everything, Fiona." She leaned into his touch. You let me. For a long moment, they simply stood there, hand in hand, heart steady, breaths mingling with the night air. Below them, the kingdom celebrated a ceremony. Up here, something quieter and deeper settled into place. Not the peace of silence, not the peace of fear being forced into stillness, but the peace that comes when two wandering souls finally stop running. Fiona looked at him, eyes shimmering. All my life, I felt like I was being shaped, pushed, controlled, like my purpose was decided before I even learned how to dream. Jeffrey's thumb stroked her jaw gently. And now I feel free, she whispered. Free to choose, free to love. Jeffrey exhaled softly, as if those words loosened the last knot inside him. I never believed love was mine to have, he confessed. Not after what happened to my father. Not after what people said about me. I thought the only way to survive was to become the thing they feared. You did what you had to do, Fiona said. But you don't need the mask anymore. His hand slid to the back of her neck, pulling her closer. No, he murmured. Not with you. Their foreheads touched, a warm, unbreakable connection settling between them. The wind whispered around them. The night stretched softly overhead. Lanterns from the courtyard flickered like distant stars, and in that moment, titles fell away. King, queen, alpha, mate, noble, beggar. None of it mattered. They were just two souls, scarred, bruised, shaped by loss, finally finding a place to rest. Home. Jeffrey pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, then her cheek, then her lips. Slow, unhurried, full of a love he no longer feared to feel. Fiona smiled against his mouth. What now? She whispered. Jeffrey slipped his arms around her waist, pulling her against him. Now we write our own story. She laughed softly. Together? Always? Below them, the kingdom cheered. Above them, the stars glowed bright. Between them, peace finally settled, quiet and complete. And so their story ended not with fear or sacrifice, but with two hearts choosing each other, fully, freely, forever. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, plus your favorite moment and character. I really love hearing your thoughts and chatting with you. Until the next love story, bye for now.